Hi there, I'm Coach Kenneth,
And I'm Coach Victoria.
and in this video we're going to be talking to you about what if your avoidant ex never moved on? You know, when you're learning about attachment styles and breakups and you're hearing us talking about an avoidant, a lot of times you can feel like your ex is completely moved on. They're not thinking about you, they don't care about you, and a lot of times we feel like they never did. But the truth of the matter is, avoidants are often impacted by their breakup later.
Oh, yeah. They have a completely different way of processing the breakup, processing emotions in general. And a really important thing to start with is understanding how the avoidant attachment style works. So it's true that for a lot of avoidants, they have almost this out of sight, out of mind type of mentality. And it's true that those who are more avoidantly attached are able to compartmentalize a lot better than those who are anxious or even secure. They're able to suppress emotions. It's something that they've developed over time since they were young as a coping mechanism to deal with life's challenges, to deal with family challenges or peer stresses and all of those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, because they grew up in such a stressful environment, the only way they could survive was to shut down, hide in their room. Maybe their parents were fighting, maybe their parents were aggressive towards them or even abusive. So they learned, this is how I can survive whatever traumatic thing is going on in my home. So now, because it happened to them literally since they were infants, babies, they're going to do that in their adult romantic relationships too. There's a correlation there.
And with avoidance, they're also typically conflict avoidant. They're also typically vulnerability avoidant, right? So that means they're less likely to draw that attention onto their own hurts and somebody else's hurts, right? So during a breakup where it's super emotionally charged, they're going to be less likely to say, okay, well, what emotions are floating around in the air right now?
Yeah.
They're going to be more likely to act stoic. They're going to be more likely to keep it together and compartmentalize and try to put on a pretty face in light of the situation.
It's kind of like they're in this survival mode where they're like, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm just not going to deal with it. I just have to do what I have to do. Because anything more than that is too overwhelming. We can only handle so much. And so the stress of a breakup on top of everything else, they wouldn't be able to function. They wouldn't be able to go to work. And many of the people that you're dating aren't even functioning well enough to go to work, right? Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they're extremely anxious. Maybe they've had so much trauma that they're just not in a good place. But that keeps them stuck, right? By not being able to process and deal with those things, it keeps them stuck from what happened in their childhood, but it also keeps them stuck from kind of moving forward and not moving on from their breakups. But nobody can escape grief, okay? And grief is very, very difficult. Margaret used to say that one of the hardest things for people to do is to grieve. And she would talk about all the unhealthy behaviors somebody grieving will do rather than feel the pain and the loss that they're going through.
Yeah, grief is something that is really, really challenging and can stick with a person for a very long time. And nobody can escape it, not even your avoidant ex. Even if it might seem like they're cool as a cucumber on the outside, grief is affecting them. The loss, that separation is affecting them if they were attached to and if the two of you were together for any significant amount of time.
Yeah, they're just not going to want to tell you that. And especially be vulnerable to tell somebody they've broken up with, because that's just going to try and keep you trying to engage with them and get answers from them, and that just makes them want to shut down even more.
Right. And grief, it's one of those things when you try to suppress it, it comes out in weird ways. What I think about when I think about emotions coming out in weird ways, as Margaret used to say, is I think about those satisfying videos where people put something like whipped cream in Crocs and watch like the cream spiral out of the holes in the Crocs. That's what I think of when we try to suppress emotions and it comes out in ways that are really unpredictable, unexpected. And with grief, we've seen people act very impulsive. We've seen people say things they don't mean, do things they don't mean. And it's just part of not being able to face something head on.
Acting out, drinking, fights,
Right.
things like that.
Right. And There is a very famous person in the field called Gabor Mate. If you haven't heard of him, please look him up. He talks extensively about trauma and how it affects our bodies. And he talks about how emotional suppression affects our health. He talks about how it affects our brain, our memory, our cognitive function, even autoimmune diseases that can come about.
Yes.
He really sees that tie and believes in that tie between mental health and physical health. And so this is not just something that we're making up, right? There are things that are, supporting this kind of idea out there. And other people in the field too have talked about how our experiences are latched into our body memory. We talk about Bessel van der Kolk. He has that famous book, The Body Keeps the Score. If you haven't read that, that's an excellent read that talks about how trauma impacts us. So if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it, but it talks about how our experiences stick with us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
those are two of my favorites as well. I've been following both of those for a long time. Gabor Mate especially. I really like his stuff. So what happens if your avoidant ex hasn't moved on? What's going to happen to them? Well, they're going to stay stuck, right? They're going to be constantly reminded of you and the relationship and the memories, and they're going to feel triggered by those things. It's going to impact how they're feeling. They'll try and suppress it. They'll try and not to, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about that person. They're going to keep trying to do that, but you can't do those things forever. Your unconscious can't push things down forever. They come out in dreams, or laying your head on the pillow at night, or when you're driving in the car and you're daydreaming and all of a sudden you think about something or are reminded of somebody. So it's going to hit them, and they're always going to kind of have you in the back of their mind. Now, we know that avoidants, they struggle with being direct in how they feel and what's bothering them. They don't like to talk about things, but we have to talk about those things. Margaret always said, you have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. You'll feel better when you talk about it. You process it. You're able to move on and to heal and to grow when you talk about it. So if they are not processing it, trying to avoid it, it's going to come out in those moments where they're, by themselves, where they're not distracted by work, when they're sitting around and they have those kind of, moments where you're alone and you're just like with yourself, right? When you're not distracted by other things, you're kind of with yourself.
And you'll see them do subtle things too.
They stalk your social media. They'll create fake accounts to stalk your social media. They go on their work accounts and stalk your social media. How many times have we heard that one? They do the indirect direct messages for you, right? They come up with silly excuses to contact you. And you're like, why are they contacting me about this? The mail.
Yeah.
Why do they keep contacting me about the mail? Although, you know what I've heard a bunch of times recently? A bike.
A bike?
A bike.
Interesting.
A bike has come up a lot lately. And the people are always like, but they never used that bike. They haven't used that bike in years. And for some reason, I keep hearing the bike recently. Yeah.
Hey, do you happen to have my Razor scooter, the one that sparks the little lights when you kick on the brakes?
Yeah. It's like, but wait, I've never seen you use that. Bikes, for some reason, that one's come up a lot lately. They will contact your friends and family, look for excuses to contact them. And you're like, why would they contact this person? They didn't need to contact this person.
Yeah.
Because they are stuck. They haven't moved on. Even if you haven't heard from them for months, sometimes for years.
Right? And they find ways of feeling connected, trying to stay connected in some way, shape, or form. And it's difficult because when you're trying to bypass your emotions or suppress your emotions, then it's hard to even know exactly what you're doing or what you're wanting or what your goal is with your behavior sometimes. The reason why we are so fervent on teaching attachment style is so that you understand yourself and what you are doing better. A lot of times you ask people, well, why'd you do that? Well, I don't know. I just thought it was a good idea at the time. Right? So being able to understand why we do things can help us have a better understanding of relationships in general, what we want, what we need from others. Yeah. It would be much better if somebody could directly tell you, hey, this is what's been going on in my mind. I've been thinking about you. I'm struggling with this or that. Direct communication is always something that we advocate for, and we know everybody struggles with it, even us sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, so my avoidant ex isn't over me? In many ways, probably not. Does it mean you'll hear from them? Maybe yes, maybe no. We can't say because every situation is truly so different. And then a lot of times they'll tell their new partner and make you seem like the greatest person ever. And you're like the phantom ex in their new relationship where the new partner's hearing about you. So it's tough because we want you to get to a place where you're okay with or without them. We want you to get to the place where you've processed and healed and grown and you feel good about life, and either they come back and you're ready and you can have something healthy with them again, or you can find somebody else that may be a better fit for you. But understand that unfortunately, avoidants really struggle to process and to deal with things because it's like if they deal with a little bit, a lot of other trauma comes up and it overwhelms them. But many avoidants do get to a place where they realize that they're the common denominator in their relationship problems.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll do something about it. And we want everybody to get to a good place where they feel they have somebody that will treat them well with love and respect. And if your ex can't do that because they don't want to work through those issues and grow, then it's going to be their loss because they would have had somebody who cared so much about them that they would have worked so hard to make it a healthy relationship.
Exactly. And just because they haven't moved on doesn't mean that they're ready for that kind of reciprocal, healthy, direct kind of relationship.
Yep.
So they might not be in that emotionally available place. So you may be seeing those little signs that we talked about. Maybe they are watching all your stories. Maybe you have heard through friends that they're asking about you. Those things don't mean reach out to them. They're trying to get to you, right?
Yep.
Those things mean they still haven't been direct enough. They still have not been direct enough.
In the words of the wise Admiral Akbar, it's a trap! My Star Wars people will know it.
Yep, I'm just here.
Yeah, she doesn't know. It's embarrassing. All right. Hopefully this one's been helpful to you. And of course, if you want to get our help personally, you can do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Zoom calls. Coach Victoria is also available for Zoom calls.
I'm here whenever you'd like to chat.
Just click on her name on the top of the website to schedule with her. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.